community-based programs for children or adults with intellectual cognitive disabilities. Like, we're found all over the place, whether your needs are physical, cognitive, emotional, psychological, whatever, what have you. So I work in a mental health setting. And so what I get to do is I get to use different recreational activities. So the facility I work at, I get to use different like group initiatives or like team building activities, but make it therapeutic. And I get to use art or sometimes music or horticulture to parallel those things to my patients' recoveries, and get to do all kinds of fun things. And basically, how can I make something like a game into something that can actually be really powerful and therapeutic? So
that sounds like the best job title in the world.
It's awesome. So I actually
get to be like a physical therapist, but by doing the things that people want to do, like the entertainment.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just technically graduated in May. And so this entire past semester from January to May, I was doing an internship at the place that I am now working at. And I love my job. I have been very fortunate. I was very fortunate to have a supervisor during the internship who really encouraged me to take risks. And so my very first like solo facilitation was teaching a group how to beatbox. And she was so into it. She loved it. And so to have like that kind of environment that just allows for me to do that kind of stuff is pretty great.
And why is that therapeutic? It kind of, does it take the patient's mind off of whatever they're currently going through, and it allows them to think about something else?
So it changes with each group, and you kind of have to follow them wherever they go. But some different themes that have come up when I facilitated this would be the mindfulness aspect of something musical or beatboxing in particular, because, you know, I always say, like, I mess up the most when I'm beatboxing, when I'm thinking about what I'm going to be doing 10 or 15 seconds ahead from now, rather than just feeling it out and letting something come out of my mouth and just letting it happen, and not worrying about, does this sound repetitive? Does this sound okay? Like, just letting it happen and just enjoying and being in the moment. Another thing too is with something as out there as beatboxing, people get really freaked out and are kind of nervous to try it and don't want to be like, you know, because that's something, it's one thing to be playing a note on a piano or a guitar or something, but like, this is coming from you, entirely you.
Right.
And there's something so powerful about that, but at the same time, also something very intimidating about that.
It's out of most people's comfort zones. I mean,
right.
Just to make those noises with your mouth, I'd be afraid that I'd sound stupid, which I probably would at first.
Right. And so having the group atmosphere of having and leaning into that support around you, and doing it together. Obviously, there's just a lot of laughter that comes through it with it too.
Of course, yeah.
Which in itself can be therapeutic. Or having someone like myself, like, model it for you and be like, wow, I'm not at this point, but there's something for me to shoot for. Or the number of people who say, like, I'm not doing that, or I can't do that. And then like halfway through, they're like, okay, what else can you teach us? Give us more. And I'm like, that's really interesting because you said you couldn't do it. And so giving, just giving them a sense of empowerment through that as well. Yeah, there's a lot of things that, come up, and just like finding the power of your own voice and using that and being creative. There's a lot of different ways to.
Since this is a music podcast, how does music come into play in therapy, and how powerful really is it in one's recovery?
I think, one of my, and I forget who this quote is by, but the way that it is summed up for me is, when words fail, music speaks. And I just think that there is something, when you work in any kind of setting where, you have to have things that are measurable and, outcomes and everything. And that's so important because we want to know that what we're doing for our patients is working. But sometimes there are things that are just like not measurable. And the impact of music, I feel like, is one of those things sometimes.
Right.
So,
Or we just can't measure it right now.
right,
But I read
right.
articles on music's effect to patients that had
Mm-hmm.
strokes. And if they listen to maybe their favorite song every day, I mean, scientists don't fully understand this right now, but it can even help people recover from something as traumatic on their cognitive state as a
Mm-hmm.
stroke.
Yeah. Um, no, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's so cool. Like, we don't fully understand why this happens, but it does. And I just think that's so amazing. I know for me too, there are certain songs that describe how I'm feeling or events that I have been through way better than any words that I could ever express. Like, just the combination of the lyrics and the music that accompanies it. I'm like, wow, that really gets how I'm feeling. If you want to know how I'm feeling, listen to this song.
Exactly.
And so I've had, patients mention too, like different songs that they love, like for reasons like that, that I think really give some insight into who they are. And, music is such a universal thing too. It's so amazing, especially in the beatboxing community, because it's so international. And there's so many of us who don't speak the same language at all. But we have this common language in beatboxing. And I think that's something really bonding and really special.
It is. So when listeners listen to this podcast, I like them to come away either inspired a lot of times, maybe in this case to pick up beatboxing and start find a love for that on their own.
Mm-hmm.
You talked about in your TED Talk a little bit about finding your path and finding what you love to do. How did you do that, and how might one, after listening to this podcast, go out there and try to find their calling? I know it's a tough question, but
Yeah. One of the things that I said in my TED Talk that I always think about, especially in my job now, is that the most seemingly trivial things can have such a big impact. I mean, like, I beatbox, and yet that can make such a big impact. And so I think thinking about those things that maybe you wouldn't have originally thought, like, wow, this is something that I could really use in my job. I talk about in the TED Talk, like, useless talents and how they're actually, like, really, they do have a purpose. You just have to be creative in how you find that. And I was very fortunate to have found this. Everyone should just become recreational therapists. That's my advice. No, I was very lucky to find this field that combined, because I'm one of those people who has a lot of different interests all over the place, and just kept searching for how can I do this? How can I make this happen? How can I combine all these things into something that I really enjoy? Because I've just found, like, with my job right now, I want to keep improving. I want to keep finding things that I can use to make a difference in my patients' lives. Like, I want to keep getting better at what I do. And I have never felt so intensely passionate about a job as I do right now. And I'm very, very fortunate, I recognize, to have been able to discover that at the age of 25. But that doesn't mean that at any age you cannot discover that. It's just, are you willing to make a change and figure that out? So for me, what that looked like was leaving Lexington, a place that I loved very much and thought I was going to stay forever, and coming back to Wisconsin and pursuing my master's. And I was very fortunate, again, and privileged to have the opportunity to do that. I think just be willing to be flexible and making changes. One of my least favorite questions from anyone is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I don't know. I've gotten into the trap of trying to figure that out before and have my life mapped out, and it's all fallen apart. And so I'm just really trying to be in the moment and take this time. Obviously, I have short and long-term goals that I would like to achieve, but I'm not mapping everything out as specifically as I used to. And so I think just taking each day as it comes and taking different opportunities that might pop up, and putting yourself out there. I get really hung up on when I post something, it doesn't sound perfect. And I'll listen to it a couple times and be like, oh, just kidding, I don't like it, I'm not going to post it. And then don't put anything out there for like months or weeks at a time. And that's such a dangerous trap, because if you're not putting things out there, how is anyone going to see what you're doing? And how are you ever going to improve and receive feedback on that? Even if it's constructive criticism, because I need that. And I spent 4 months getting that in my internship every single day, which was so helpful for me. Yeah, I don't know if that makes any sense at all.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and that's very inspiring, and I hope people can listen to that and go out of their comfort zones themselves and put themselves into situations where they can find something new. And, you know, you never know. Maybe that thing that you find is the thing that you want to dedicate a lot of time to.
I think another thing, too, that has been, I cannot overstate the importance of surrounding yourself with people who are going to push you and challenge you and get you to that next level. So like I mentioned Kayla earlier, and being willing to put myself out there and work with someone who I have looked up to so much, who is one of the kindest people I have ever met, and just so down to earth and so wonderful, who has helped me so much to grow as an artist. And really everyone, you know, for the most part in the beatboxing community, like so welcoming and open. And it's just such a beautiful thing. Like I kind of took a huge risk and flew myself out to New York City last November for the American Beatbox Championships, because I knew if I wanted to get better, I had to start immersing myself in the community in person. Right. And in Wisconsin, there's not really a whole lot. The closest thing to us is Midwest Championships, which is in Chicago. But I like kind of hopped on the boat a little too late for that. So I was like, okay, we're just going to go out to New York City and it's going to be great. And that was a huge risk to do that. But how did that
go for you?
It was amazing. It has set everything else into motion for me, quite honestly. I met so many wonderful people. And I miss them all. Like, we spent so much time together over the course of a few days, but like, it's just like, it feels, I just can't describe it. Like, it's just such a good feeling, like when you're all together in this musical family. And
absolutely. Well,
look forward.
Something I always say is you're only as good as the people that you surround yourself with. Mm-hmm. And just being on this podcast and talking with so many interesting people, I've really learned a lot so far. So it's been an amazing opportunity just doing this. Yeah.
So I really look forward to getting to spend more time with them later this year, and continuing to make connections with those people. And, you know, even through posting stuff on Instagram and the different people who reach out to you and talk to you. And it's just really cool because there is such a big online presence, because we are so all literally spread out all over the world. And then just finding those people who are going to challenge you. Like everyone at my job too. Like, I am so lucky to have all the coworkers that I do, because they make me better. They make me a better therapist. They make me a better musician. They make me a better person. I'm really lucky.
100%. All right, Sammy. Well, thank you so much for your time today and on our podcast. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's it, folks. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. If you are an artist and would like to have a chance to be on the OpenMic app podcast, all you simply have to do is go to www.theopenmicapp.com/podcast. Again, if you weren't listening, that's www.theopenmicapp.com/podcast. I hope to see you there. Peace.